So the cost of living continues to be a serious challenge for many South African households. In fact, for the most vulnerable, they struggle to access quality food due to the high cost of essential items. Experts are now warning that South Africa might have to deal with the serious threat of food insecurity. Let's make sense of this for you now. Bring in Christo van der Rheede, who's the Executive Director of Agri SA. Christo joins us via our telephone line this morning. Great to have you on, Christo. Thanks very much indeed for making time to chat to us. So first things first, is South Africa a food insecure country, or should we look at improving things like access and delivery?
South Africa at this point in time is regarded as relatively food secure, especially on the continent of Africa. What is important is to know that we've had a very good summer grain season. Our maize stock sits at approximately 15 million tons. Our soya stock sits at approximately 2.2 million tons. And then overall, we are doing very, very good in terms of our citrus, our fruit, the vegetable sector, as well as our meat sector, although there were setbacks such as foot and mouth disease and so forth. Our biggest challenge, obviously, is people's access to food. In other words, their ability to buy food. And that is becoming a great concern for us.
Yeah, and you speak about the summer season. Typically, that's when the harvest is great. In fact, we're told to expect another La Nina season, which is bountiful rain. Hopefully, it's not damaging. That would be great in the absence of load shedding, but the power cuts might actually undo whatever good work is to come.
Indeed. Our big challenge, obviously, sits with processing of products. Because if you're a dairy farmer and you produce a lot of milk, that milk must be kept in cold storage facilities before it sort of lands up on the table of your customers. And if the milk goes sour, then you have to either throw it away or because you cannot use it for human consumption. And that applies to meat because if you're a farmer, you're a poultry farmer or a meat farmer, all of your products go to an abattoir where it gets slaughtered. And from there, it must be kept in a cold chain, throughout the cold chain, so that the quality can be preserved. And if anything happens during that process and your quality is compromised, then you also it's not fit for human consumption. So for the processing part of agriculture, this is now becoming a huge challenge.
Yeah, how is this affecting steps before the processing? I'm thinking irrigation, for instance, water treatments on the actual farm, which typically, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, need electricity in order to function properly.
Indeed. Throughout the agricultural value chain, you require electricity to some extent, especially in terms of your primary agriculture sector. Many farmers rely on irrigation. A center pivot takes approximately 8 to 10 hours to complete a full cycle. If the electricity goes down, it means part of your plants do not get the necessary fertilizer, biochemicals, and even water. It means you might lose that. So the processing part is of critical importance. Then you also need electricity to get your pump station up and running, your compressors up and running, and due to power surge, you sometimes lose your equipment because the power surge impact or can destroy your compressors or your pumps, etc.
Yeah.
So it's a mess.
The energy crisis is largely a domestic issue, but of course there are international factors at play too here. I understand that Russia, for instance, is an exporter mostly of things like fertilizer. Given what they're doing to Ukraine, that's obviously affected the supply chain there and may have, a domino effect on how much food essentially ends up costing in this country.
Look, the agriculture sector had two very good seasons, 2019, 2020. Even last year, it played a critical role in terms of making sure that our country remains food secure. What we've seen of late is a spike in the price of fertilizer due to the Ukrainian-Russian conflict and war. We've also seen a spike in the price of diesel, although some of these prices are lowering, especially in the case of diesel. Our biggest challenge remains increase, for example, in the cost of electricity. We've seen also an increase in the cost of interest rate or the cost of capital due to the increase in interest rate. And that puts a lot of pressure on farmers because you have to now contend with high input costs. Also, the cost of doing business is becoming more and more expensive, and the possibility of making a profit on the goods that you produce becomes diminished over time. And that in itself makes farmers wonder whether they should continue what they are doing.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, there are reports that some of the farmers say that they're actually being liquidated unfairly, some of them claim, by the land bank. How big a problem is this?
No, that is not true. I must really dismiss that. We engage with the land bank all the time.
Yeah.
Remember now, liquidation is a court process. Only the court can liquidate you with all the facts and figures on the table. Yes, there are instances, but that's the minority of people. The bigger challenge, obviously, is the severe financial pressure that the entire sector is under. And that will lead to a bigger amounts of farmers being liquidated. And that's where we need to engage with government to ask the question, how do we then assist our farming sector? Because remember, if we lose our farmers, you stand to lose your food security status as a country. And it's farmers and their workers that produce the food. But also, it's farmers that take the risk to produce that food for the country. And we will have to go back to the drawing board and see to what extent we can assist our farmers, like the European Union is doing, the Americans are doing, the Brazilians and the Chinese are doing. Also, our farmers get very little production support, and that is the issue that we need to look at. Yeah,
concerns around the ROI, the return on investments there. All right, given what's at stake then, what kind of support, if any, is the land bank giving to farmers, especially those who are struggling?
Remember, the land bank played a critical role over many decades to support farmers. And at this point in time, the majority of its clients are commercial farmers. So it has been supporting the commercial farming sector to a very large extent. To a lesser extent, obviously, it supports your emerging farmers, but that's due to the fact that the bank itself has decided to become a sort of fully fledged bank, meaning that it now operates on the same principles as a commercial bank. Now, for the agriculture sector, that's a problem. We need a land bank. In other words, a land bank that has what they call patient capital. Because farmers experience droughts, farmers experience low commodity prices, farmers experience all kinds of risks. And that's why you need to have a land bank that can assist your farmers with patient capital and that can restructure their loans if they go through a serious challenge. But at this time, I don't think the land bank is in that position to do so due to a number of factors. Yeah. And I think it's important that you guys engage directly with the land bank to understand. But that the land bank needs support from government, and there's no question about that.
Interesting. Of course, what's taking place geopolitically around the world may in some instances present challenges, but there may also be opportunities. I wonder to what extent farmers can make the most of, for instance, Russia not being able to provide as much oil or fertilizer as it used to. Do you reckon there's enough support, enough capital, for instance, to try step into the breach and, essentially make up for the drop in supply?
All the opportunities let me rather rephrase and say opportunities are abound in South Africa. Meaning that we've got Phalaborwa mine where phosphate is mined. That mine must be optimized so that we can be less reliant on importing of phosphates, Sasol, nitrogen, Eskom, sulfur, and you name it. We've got all the ingredients, and we've had a very good fertilizer sector many years ago. But when we opened up and we liberalized the economy, many people said, but why should we do our own thing? Let's rather import. It's so much cheaper. Now that chicken has come back home to roost. And what we need to do is to say, let's see how we can exploit our own resources to become more self-reliant, more independent. And then secondly, we've got gas fields in Mozambique. We can create biofuels in South Africa. So those are opportunities that are abound. but it all depends on the cost, the production cost. If that production cost becomes too high, it renders you uncompetitive. And then people would rather say, but let me rather import my clothing from China. Why should I have it made in South Africa where the cost of production is so high? Remember, we are big cotton producers. We are big wool producers. Where's our clothing sector to make the most of these primary resources that we have? We are blessed in abundance in terms of primary resources.
Yeah, absolutely. Conversations around our competitive advantage given what's taking place in the world. Christo van der Rheede, thanks very much indeed for speaking to us. Really do appreciate your time. And watch the space, get your sense of how else this unfolds. Christo, of course, is the Executive Director at Agri SA.